Hello, everybody. Welcome into Front Office Overtime. We are excited to have you here. We're going to get into a little bit of question and answer today. This will be a shorter show today than it was yesterday. If you're new to Front Office Show, thanks for joining us. We're happy to have you here. Normally, it's Trevor Lane and myself Monday through Friday here on the Front Office Show, but we're doing a little something extra here with the off season coming. We're calling it Front Office Overtime. Shout out to the Private Ryan, a loyal YouTube viewer, listener, follower, for giving us that name. That was pretty great. So what we're going to get into here is all your questions about the NBA off season. We are a week out from free agency opening, a week and an hour actually away from free agency officially opening for teams to negotiate with other teams' free agents. So we're going to get into all that stuff. So we're going to be super excited. So get your questions coming in here. We'll start pulling questions in a moment and get into whatever it is you guys want to talk about with the NBA offseason. We had a minor option decision made earlier today. The Denver Nuggets declined their team option for Vlatko Cancar. So he will be an unrestricted free agent. My guess, as matches some of the reporting, is that he'll likely re-sign with the Denver Nuggets for next season and possibly beyond, as he is somebody who they really like a lot. He's very popular, and we'll kind of see if they are able to keep him back there. And we are waiting. The other option deadline today is O'Shea Brissett of the Boston Celtics. We're waiting on news from him. We will get that here. I'm going to drop this in here right now. Keith and Trevor, it's just me on Front Office Overtime today. Trevor is he's already been working hard. I know he's been doing Lakers videos, including a Lakers live stream earlier today. But I'll answer the question and give you my opinion. Do I agree with the narrative that Darvin Ham was undeservingly fired, or do you think the firing was warranted? For my opinion, Kyle, I think it was warranted if the team was done. I think one of the biggest mistakes that NBA teams make is if they stick with a player or a coach just because they feel like they have to. If you feel like the fit is not correct for a player or a coach, you're always best to move on and to go in a slightly different direction. So then what you want to do then is move on, rip the Band-Aid off, go in a different direction. Sometimes sticking in there and trying to make it work just makes it worse. So I think from that sense, it was probably warranted. And I think the Lakers were ready to make a change. I think they knew it wasn't going to work for them with this. So we will figure out where this goes. I saw a question. I can't find it now. The chat's moving pretty quick about JJ Redick, why he hasn't hired his staff yet. He's only had the job for under a week now. So he'll I'm sure he's working on that. He'll figure that out. That is not necessarily the most important thing for the Lakers ahead of the draft, but I'm sure he's already got guys in mind that he wants to work with, probably coaches he's been with before and the like, and from there. So we'll see where that ultimately goes for him. All right, we got a super chat coming in from Caleb. Caleb, how does salary matching work in sign-in trades? Does the receiving team only need to reach half of the first year salary? No, they've got a match on the full. What happens, though, is the player on the outside, in some cases, does not count for the full amount of their salary. So this is the only time when base year compensation still kicks in, is in a sign-in trade. So that is that's where it can make things a little bit messy. That's why often you'll see sign-in trades, like let's say a player is being signed and traded for $20 million. That player may get signed and trade into cap space with a team. And then on the outgoing side, the team that traded the player away, they will create a traded player exception of 10 million because it only counts on their side for half. So that's where it gets a little tricky. But if you're bringing the player in, you have to match salary or be able to absorb into cap space or whatever your mechanism for getting that player. You need to be able to do that full salary amount that you need to account for with that. Good question, though, there. Sean, thank you. Appreciate it. And Ashikara. I apologize to you guys if I butcher your names. It's not intentional. That's just me. So I apologize on that. But thank you guys for the support. I don't see questions attached. So hopefully these were just nods of support, which we think it was great. I'll go to Drew's question here. What is the biggest salary cap myth that fans believe? I think right now in the present, that biggest myth is that that when it's a bad free agent class, that salary cap is having salary cap space is useless. I think in that case, you can use it in trades to whether that be absorb bad contracts and get draft picks, be a facilitator in a trade, or just get something in there where you do a trade and kind of go in that direction. So yeah, I think that is one of the biggest myths that's out there is that people think salary cap space is useless in a bad free agent class. I don't think that's a thing at all that people should be overly focused on. All right, I'm going to go back and try to grab a few more questions out of here with from folks in here. Is the offseason machine gone on Spot Track? So I believe you're talking about the manage tool right now. The manage tool is down. We went through a major site redesign on Spot Track and a huge migration. With that, it is being worked on. We'll see, but we do have the trade machine is up and running, but the manage tool, which allows you to sign and waive and really simulate an entire offseason for a team, that is not available at the moment. We're hopeful that will be back, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, including we want to make sure if we're going to put a tool out there, any tool we want to put out into the world, we want to have all of the rules correct and working exactly how they should work. So that's where we want to make sure that we don't just throw something out there just to have it out there. We want to make sure that it is working as it should be. Mario asks, what's one rule you'd change from the CBA? I'm going to give you one I think I would probably change. And that is, I think they went a little too far with the trade restrictions for apron teams. Right now, I know this is something Trevor has been all over, and it's something that has him really concerned. Right now, teams that are over the first apron, you can't take back more money in a trade than you send out. And if you do that, if you're under the first apron, you get hard capped at the first apron. So I think that makes it really, really hard to find trades that work. It's very rare that you're going to find an exact matching salary trade, and that becomes really hard. And then obviously second apron teams, they can't do that, and they can't aggregate players. I'm okay with restricting it on second apron teams, the most expensive teams. I'm okay with that. I think the challenge is when you put it on the first apron teams, we may see this really impact the trade market where teams either can't do it right away or they don't want to subject themselves to a hard cap. And that gets really hard to start to make some moves. So I think that really, really becomes something we may need to keep an eye on, and we'll see what that looks like. So I'm gonna reserve judgment on that for now. But I think that is probably something I would maybe tweak or adjust from the way it is put out there. But I'm willing to give it an off season and see what it looks like. Isham says, who's going to be the next Pistons coach? I kind of think it's going to be James Borrego. I talked about this on the show last week, kind of if I do the wind horse pointing fingers and leaning back and getting comfy for story time. I think that there is a chance that you saw Trajan Langdon came in from the New Orleans Pelicans. They hired Fred Vinson from the New Orleans Pelicans as a lead assistant. James Borrego, former head coach with the Hornets. He was also with the Magic briefly as a head coach, as an interim head coach, but most recently was with the New Orleans Pelicans. I'm maybe connecting dots there a little too much, but I think that could be the way we see this come together, and we may see him come in and take over as they kind of reset everything there in Detroit. And that way you have very good alignment from the front office through the coaching staff on what your kind of goals are with that. Go to Oshkar. With the opportunity to plus up Caruso this season to bring down the extension amount, do you think Collins to OKC is still possible? It is, because I don't think you're going to see them bring Alex Caruso, what Ashkar is talking about here is the ability to renegotiate and extend Alex Caruso. The Thunder can do that by using some of their cap space. So what they could do is they could technically extend Caruso all the way up to his max if they had the cap space to do that by adding a cap space to his number for this year. And then you can tack additional years on. When you tack the additional years on, you can actually lower the salary from year zero, because that would be this year, to year one of the extension by 40%. That's it. He's not going to get that much. He's not going to get plussed up all that much. So I think what you may see is them do some renegotiate and extend with him to bring his number up a little bit, but they may still have plenty of cap space left over, because in a vacuum, Alex Caruso is probably going to get something in the 15 to 20 million range. It would be my guess for a first year salary, just given kind of his age and his injury history. So I think that's where that may go, and they'll still have plenty of cap space. But something I would keep an eye on with the Thunder is Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins are also in similar type situations where the team may want to do a similar type of thing, if not just a straight extension with those guys. So I think there's a lot of flexibility in the Thunder offseason where they can do a lot of stuff, including signing a free agent with cap space. They've got about 33.7 million by my projections that they should hit the offseason running with. So you can really go after free agents. You can make a big trade for a player like John Collins, who I think would be a wonderful fit there. So Sam Presti's not done. There's still a lot more to come with that team there in Oklahoma City. How long this is from Giovanni, how long do I think the Celtics can keep their team together? I think for at least the next 3 or 4 years, the bulk of the team. Al Horford has confirmed, for anybody still thinking Al Horford's going out on top and saying, I did it, I'm out of here, I am calling it a career, I'm moving on to retirement. He is not. He is confirmed again today. He is playing next year. He will be back in Boston next year. He actually said his plan is he's going to take a couple weeks off and then get right into off-season training to get ready for next year. So Al Horford will be back next year with Boston. So you're going to see everybody basically back of their core group next season. So that'll be where that one all kind of comes together. And then from there, I think what you're going to see is then you might start to see a move here, move there. Maybe Horford retires. I don't know. Maybe he comes back on a cheaper contract. You may see at that point them start looking at other things. But I think the core group, Tatum, Brown, Holiday, I think Derek White, and then Kristaps Porzingis, I think all those guys will be back to obviously next year. And I think probably for a year or two beyond that as well. And then it really comes down to, is the team still a contender? Are they starting to transition into Holiday's aging out a little bit? Maybe Porzingis is still continuing to have injury issues, and they start to pivot at that point into a little bit of a different roster build. But they've got things set up to be pretty flexible. And obviously, if things really, the wheels come off and you're on a contender, they're not going to be paying hundreds of millions in luxury tax penalties to keep a team together that's not a contender. But that's more of a 3-4 years out probably thing right now. And I don't think that's the way they're thinking. So I think you're going to see this team come together. Hey, my guy Bill. This is our Celtics blog editor extraordinary. He's the best. I love you, Bill, man. It's great to see you in here. Knowing there's a huge opportunity in Boston, considering Porzingis' health and Horford's age, what minimum bigs could chase a ring with the Celtics? This is a great question, because that's going to be kind of the market Boston's going to be in is minimum players only, really, at this point. So I think when we get into the positional rankings for centers, I think first opportunity would be just re-sign Luke Cornett and maybe Xavier Tillman Sr. They really like those two guys, so I think they would try to do what they can there. But guys who could be available on the minimum, maybe Andre Drummond. We'll see. I think Drummond may get more than a minimum contract this year. Good team may give him part of an exception. He was really, really good for the Bulls. And anybody who knows my long-term history, I've not been an Andre Drummond guy. So for me to say that means he had to play really well. Drew Eubanks is opting out with the Suns, so he could be a guy who's available for the minimum. Maybe Goga Batadze. We'll see. I think he's probably earned a little bit of a raise. Mason Plumlee's another guy. But I think Boston's main thing would be, let's try to just keep Luke Cornett. Let's try to keep Xavier Tillman. Let's try to keep as much of this group together before they would change it up and go into a different type of players that they would be looking at the outside. But we'll see how that comes together. The new CBA rules, this is from Jimmy, seem heavy-handed with restrictions. Do you think it could be preparation for future TV deal salary spikes? The cap is not going to spike. So what's happened within this new CBA, one of the things that they also agreed to was cap smoothing. So what that means is the cap will never go up more than 10% in the life of this CBA. So what's going to happen is you are going to see the cap, let's say it should go up 20%. It'll go up 10%. Then that remaining 10% will spill into the next year and into the next year until we get caught up. And that's how the cap smoothing works. So they wanted to avoid to make sure that there would be no massive spike like there was in 2016, which on a positive note, meaning for a outcome that was obviously very good for that team, led to Kevin Durant with the Warriors. On a negative note, you saw a lot of bad contracts signed. The ones I always give Trevor a hard time about, Luol Deng, Timofey Mozgov, but they were merely a couple of really bad ones. It's, I believe, Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue termed them the sour 16s, which makes perfect sense because those were really, really rough, type of contracts there. So they did the cap smoothing. So we will not see a massive spike in the salary cap coming this year. Nick, thank you for the support. Appreciate you. Darren Flowers says, people saying the Spurs should make big moves now, but wouldn't it be a smarter idea to tank for the 2025 draft to get Victor a second star player? Yes and no. I think some of what that may be is I think there are still some who believe Victor Wembanyama wants to win sooner rather than later. And he's really pushing the Spurs to try to do more and more and more and more as far as winning. So I don't know where that's ultimately going to land out for San Antonio. So I think, yes, I understand where you're coming from. The 2025 draft is going to have a lot of high-end talent. Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, those are two of my favorite players. But there's a lot of other guys that everyone will get to know. I assume probably the Friday morning after the second round of the draft on Thursday. Remember, the draft this year is a 2-day event on Wednesday and Thursday this week. So Friday, there's almost always a termed a way too early 2025 mock draft. And that'll probably come out, I assume, on ESPN sometime in the wee hours of Friday morning. Will be up and posted when everybody wakes up to consume it and take a look at it. I think in that position, in that mock draft, you're going to see a bunch of names that you probably aren't familiar with because there's going to be a lot of young kids and a couple of very young European players. Then you'll get into some of the guys who return to college, maybe a few more familiar names. But I guarantee you by Christmas at the latest, you'll know these kids' names. So Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, I think it's Dylan Harper. These guys are going to be really good. A couple of those guys are going to Rutgers, which is really kind of interesting. Rutgers not a traditional NCAA basketball power, but they're going to have a bunch of players. So you're going to have a lot of really good players that come into this draft class in 2025. So maybe the Spurs should. I think the Spurs are probably just going to say, let's take it as it comes. If this means we drop out in the draft because the Western Conference is really tough and we're not quite ready yet, so be it. If we can acquire the right players and compete for a play-in spot, we'll do that as well, and we'll push there. Giovanni, who's the ideal pick for the Lakers with the 17th pick? I mean, Bronny James, right? Of course. No, that's obviously, I'm being silly there. That's a little too early for Bronny. I think probably more likely, I would like to see them get a big, or either that or a really good wing. Maybe a ball handler if one slips because they may need to replace D'Angelo Russell. Really, the answer is the best player available. Whoever is the highest rated player on their board, that's who you pick. You don't necessarily need a draft for fit there. I know some folks have kind of honed in on maybe Zach Edey being a guy who could be available there. I've seen if they go with a guard. Jared McCain could be somebody that they go with. So we'll see. On Wednesday night, a few more days till the draft. That's going to be a lot of fun. Shout out here. We will be live. Trevor, myself, and Sean Davis for the first round of the draft. We'll probably get started right around a couple minutes ahead of the draft itself starting. And then we'll be live throughout the first round, breaking everything down. Hopefully lots of trades, lots of other stuff to get into with that. But for the Lakers, when we get to that 17th pick, best player available. That's the way they need to go. You are not necessarily drafting for need there. Nick says, "Hey Keith, me and my son love you guys. Thank you. We really appreciate that. Met you at the ASU. Oh, the mock trade deadline at ASU in Phoenix. That was fantastic. Great event run by my guy Kyle there. Look that up if anybody is a student and you're interested in competing in a mock trade deadline event at Arizona State University. You can Google ASU mock trade deadline competition, and it comes. There's a really cool competition that was just an absolute blast. Sixers question: any shot at marketing, and if we did a sign and trade away, say Toby, I assume that means Tobias Harris, do we get the full TPE? You would get likely most of that TPE. It would depend on how much, but they wouldn't do a sign. They would just let him go, most likely. I'd be very surprised if there's a sign and trade, because the idea is you want to have cap space. Then you don't need the traded player exception for him if you're going to have cap space. So you would forego traded player exception, just let him go there. Now, if he's trying to go somewhere that doesn't have cap space, then maybe you work out a sign and trade and you bring back a player or a draft pick or something if the other team really, really wanted him and they couldn't sign him outright. Any shot at marketing? I don't think so. I don't get no sense that that was really good English there. I get no sense that the Jazz are going to trade Markkanen. I think the more likely path is Utah looks to renegotiate and extend his contract, which would mean, like we talked about a little bit earlier in the show, paying him a lot more on the front end of his deal right now, and then getting him for more years added on to that after. That I think if Utah does not land star. They've said they're going big game hunting. They're going star hunting this offseason. Both Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck, who lead their front office, have said the same thing. I think, Dan, what you're looking at is the Jazz turn around and use their cap space to renegotiate and extend Markkanen and get him locked in. He's as close as a franchise player as that team has in Utah right now, and he's a pretty good one for them to build around. He seems happy to be there, and they're happy to have him. All right, we're coming up on 25 minutes, so we are going to wrap with this one. Jason M says, thoughts on potential PG to the Knicks? This came up earlier today. The first place I saw it from was Mark Stein of the Stein Line. Shout out to Mark over on Substack. Great Substack. You should definitely subscribe. He does great work all throughout the year, and obviously a lot of great intel right now in the offseason. But PG to the Knicks, what the idea now that's floated around with Paul George is, if he's not re-signing with the Clippers or extending with the Clippers, would be to, rather than go the free agent route, would be to opt in and get traded. The example I used to explain this the other day was Chris Paul. When Chris Paul was finishing up his tenure with the Clippers previously, what he ended up doing with this was he ended up saying, I want to go to the Rockets. The Rockets had no ability to sign him as a free agent, and doing a sign and trade was going to cause issues with a hard cap. So what Chris Paul did was he opted into the final year of his contract, then got traded to the Rockets. This would be a very similar thing here with Paul George, where if he said, I want to go to the Knicks, he would then opt in for $48.8 million. He would get traded to the Knicks. And then a couple people have asked me, but then can he not sign, an extension? He could sign with an extension, but he would have to wait 6 months. There'd be a 6-month waiting restriction, but that's fine. If you get that done in July, you're talking January or so, maybe even February with that. And they will pop in there, and that could be how that comes together. So that's where this may head, is maybe Paul George goes there. This could be a way with for the Clippers to return some value and not just lose Paul George outright. If he was to, like, say, sign with the Sixers or the Magic or the Thunder or a cap space team, the Clippers could then say, hey, we want back players X and Y in a trade here, and that could be a way for them to do this. So that's something to at least keep an eye on here. I think that's really, really important with this. So that's the last question we're going to do here. I will pump this though, because Dirty Dancer dropped it in there. Tune in to Keith on No Ceilings in a couple hours. Yeah, I'm joining the No Ceilings guys. We will be live at 8:15 p.m. Eastern, breaking down more NBA draft type stuff and some NBA offseason. I'm going to get a chance to get into some of my favorite players in this NBA draft, which is something that I don't get a lot to do a lot here. We will have a draft show coming up this week on this show on Front Office Show with Bryce Simon. Will join, whether it's Trevor and I or just me. Bryce has been doing a lot of great work covering the draft, and Trevor and I will be back tomorrow for a regularly scheduled Front Office Show during the week, and we're leading up to the NBA draft later this week, Wednesday and Thursday, and then a very, very busy NBA offseason. It's option season, qualifying offer season, and free agency opens a week from today, a little more than 1 week away, 1 week in 33 minutes by my count here on the East Coast, 6 p.m. Eastern on June 30th is when it'll all get started. So we're really excited. This is going to be a really fun, busy week. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to the show. Please like the show. Turn on your notifications so you know when we go live. Trevor and I will be live a lot this off season, breaking down everything that happens, including every Friday. We'll also be live for the NBA draft later this week. And then at the start of free agency, at least the first few nights of free agency, we'll go live in the evening to break down everything that happened. And if you go live and turn on notifications, you'll know when I go live here on what we're calling now, for now, because I kind of like it. I thought it was fun. Front Office Overtime. So thanks for hanging out with me here for a little bit as we got into some questions. We'll see you all tomorrow.